Why do people go to film school? Most people would answer to become better at or learn about filmmaking. So what is the result of that training? Meaning, if somebody made a movie, then went to film school and afterwards made another movie, how would these two movies compare? When I asked my friend this, they comedically responded that after honing their filmmaking craft, we would hope that the movie they make after is better. And I agree. We have defined a skill or talent which people can and do definitively improve at. Thus, we have defined a metric to measure all the various ways in which a greater work surpasses a lesser. This is the measure of objectivity. Since I'm sure that many people listening to this have been hesitant to concede this point by referencing that good is defined by people's enjoyment, I simply say, this is the metric of subjectivity. I concede this is a parallel, unrelated metric which gives valid insight and has interesting conversations surrounding it, but undeniably does not invalidate the metric based on objective analysis. Just like, yes, the metric of objective analysis does not and cannot invalidate subjective analysis and conclusions based on the subjective. Before continuing, let me set the stage of the debate. Just Right and many other film critics often present their arguments, which usually consist of both objective and subjective analysis, and label it all as subjective so that they can hide behind "it's just my opinion" to deflect any criticism. However, the branding and even titles of the videos of these channels market them as objective analyses. Some channels are definitely personalities where subjective analysis is more interesting, but since most are not, they market their videos to a general audience, and it works. Note that labeling your objective analysis as subjective or conflating the two does not automatically make it so. If an argument based in objectivity is attacked, regardless of the label, it can and should be debated. MauLer and Wolf have videos that primarily break down movies with objective analysis. Since there is a lot to talk about, these make for very interesting, long-form content, but they don't shy away from interjecting with their opinions and personal conclusions either. These interjections are obviously separate from their objective analysis and are welcome additions to make a video interesting. The difference is that by clearly delineating between the subjective and objective, it says that they are confident enough in their objective analysis and accept the responsibility of this. If they make a mistake, they are forced to correct it since it is based in fact. Note the importance of both subjectivity and objectivity as it relates to media criticism. One of these has a deep internal importance since it represents our own experience or the experience of somebody we care about / are invested in, and we are inherently interested in this. The other purely represents the film itself, separated from emotion. Some might say this is analyzing like the robot. However, subjective analysis is based on the content of the film, just like objective analysis, meaning, in order to have an opinion on the film, you need to have watched the film. This seems obvious, but it is important to establish that subjectivity is rooted in the same content that objectivity criticizes. One of these methods, however, deals with and is based in interpreting the content of the film directly, whereas the other is based in our feelings, which are in turn based on the contents of the film. Since no one can invalidate opinions, and the extent to which discussing emotion is interesting varies depending on the person speaking and your relationship to them, as well as perhaps their own storytelling talent, we can say that discussing subjectivity has its limits and is inherently pointless. There is not much to discuss, other than explaining how you felt and perhaps even, dare I say, why. Since part of that why is definitively aspects of the movie itself, it follows that in order to have purposeful discussion or debate about a movie, one would objectively break down its components and assess their quality in order to make a conclusion about the film as a whole. A quick anecdote to further reinforce the importance of objectivity is this. In order to have a conversation about, for example, Darth Vader revealing that he is Luke's father, regardless of whether the discussion is emotional, factual, or both, the people discussing would have to accept the objective fact that Darth Vader indeed said the words, "Luke, I am your father." If one person thought he said, "Luke, I am your uncle" instead, although he is welcome to have feelings about the scene he remembers, there can be no discussion about the same film until the facts are determined. Since the scene can be easily rewatched, the facts of the movie can be agreed upon, and then conversation can continue. Despite the hyperbole of this example, in reality, mistakes are easy to make. We misremember lines all the time or simply do not realize something was said or established, which might alter our interpretation of the film moving forward, due to it being based on flawed information. However, there is still a conversation to be had here. In my Blade Runner 2049 review, I point out multiple instances where the viewer doesn't have information that could positively impact their engagement with the film. Go check out my video if I released it. If not, stick around because it's coming out soon, I promise. Back to the conversation at hand. Note that I am not saying, nor has anyone I know of ever said, that objectivity is more important to a movie being good. But note that this is due to the semantics of arguing what makes a movie good. Good is a general term that in this case conflates the conclusions from subjective and objective analyses. These two meanings hide together in the same word, and it is important to be able to differentiate between the two. For example, if you define a movie as good due to how much you enjoyed it or how much everyone that saw it enjoyed it, you will be inadvertently caught in an endless, purposeless debate with somebody that defines good as the objective quality of the elements of the film. It is important to differentiate between these in a formal manner before discussing the film, as often, colloquially, we can discern the meaning of someone saying, "It was a good movie, but I didn't like it," or "That was hot garbage, let's watch it again sometime with more friends." These are both valid statements, and we understand the difference because the subjective and objective conclusions are understood to be independent of each other. These are examples where the conclusions of the subjective and the objective analyses contrast. Note that if they were in line, the difference would be obfuscated, for example, simply saying, "It was good," or "It was bad." In these cases, it is possible that they are referring to both subjective and objective metrics, or perhaps only one or the other, in which case, context or further discussion would be required. The use of good and bad as final conclusions to describe media is almost entirely non-existent in the analyses of those that acknowledge the existence of and differentiate between the two types of analysis, whereas those that have not yet reached this understanding can base an entire career on writing where they consistently conflate the two and only acknowledge the existence of one. Unfortunately, we saw an hour-long debate with Just Right failed to progress past this point, likely due to his strongly held belief that the good he would like to believe in is based in subjectivity, and also due to the inability of MauLer and Wolff to convince him in the semantic differentiation. Just Right thought a couple steps ahead and inferred his opposition's conclusion, that words such as good or better could label the movie based on objectivity, meaning that Just Right thinks that accepting objective art criticism as valid could lead to labeling art as good based on objectivity, whereas he would like to critique and label art as good only based on subjectivity. Thus, it is apparent that Just Right believes that accepting objectivity as real and debating the tangible elements of a film, which by definition form the basis of his subjective opinions, would somehow invalidate what he feels. This misunderstanding is based entirely on semantics. It really is heartbreaking that they could not have a conversation because of this impasse, especially since Wolff and MauLer had not and consistently have not used objective analysis to definitively label a movie as good or bad. The fear of the use of objective analysis for this purpose led Just Right to not concede anything and die on the hill of rejecting objective analysis of art as valid whatsoever. Contrarily, it is heartwarming for everyone involved to reach the following conclusion: that neither side has to give up anything in order to have that conversation. Subjectivity and objectivity each have their time and place, and likewise their strengths and weaknesses. Objective analysis can make more definitive statements regarding the film than subjective, since it directly tackles the movie and deconstructs it until every stroke of genius and mistake is visible, quantifiable, and discussable. These discussions could conclude that the mistakes or genius are inconsequential or insufficient respectively, but still be interesting regardless. This approach leads to deep debates where both sides are showing their references to back up what they believe, or at least why they believe it. Likewise, it should not be out of the realm of logic to reach the second conclusion, that the subjective cannot be denied. One definitive statement can be made from subjective analysis, and that is how you feel. And despite the entire world's opinion or the facts of the movie, this cannot be taken from you. Now that you understand the semantics of the metrics of art criticism, you can differentiate between these two metrics yourself, thus making both the statement, "It is good because I like it," and "It is good because of X, Y, and Z," both valid, as long as you differentiate between the two meanings of good and make clear where the source of your conclusion comes from. To conclude, let me say this. I wish that people were confident enough in what they feel that they could open themselves up to have purposeful debate about what they know. Thank you for listening all the way through. I think that I'm going to make a part 2 of this video where I expand on the discussion as a whole and not just how it relates to this specific debate. I actually had a whole bunch written on the subject just based on various EFAP episodes and MauLer videos. I especially thought the first hour of the TFA review was really interesting. What I wrote in this video is actually completely independent content that I wrote out one night when inspiration hit, and then I refined it into the video you see now. Despite being about Just Right's conversation with MauLer and Wolf, I tried really hard to make it generally applicable to all art analysis. If I make a part 2, I'd like to expand on the subject using quotes from both sides, show how various arguments were misunderstood, unanswered, and ultimately led to unproductive discussion. These quotes essentially back up every part of this essay, but I felt like it would break the pacing if I constantly shoehorned in audio clips, especially since they might require context or discussion. I couldn't find a place to put a whole section devoted to them, since a lot of the meta-analysis and my argumentation depended on reaching the end of this essay. I'm really happy with how this video turned out and overall flow of the essay, so I decided against including them here. So, let me know if you'd be interested in more. I have other video ideas on the way, including the aforementioned Blade Runner 2049 review and other miscellaneous ideas. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and if you're unfamiliar with the video I'm talking about, I will link it in the description. Definitely recommend you check it out if you're at all interested in the subject.